What if everything you loved, your home, your family, your sense of safety, vanished in the blink of an eye? Rusty was once a proud German shepherd, full of energy and loyalty, chasing after red balls under a warm sun. But one tragic accident took his sight, and soon after, the life he knew. Left to wander alone in a world of darkness, he searched for hope where none seemed to exist. Could kindness still find him? Before we explore this powerful journey, please subscribe to our channel, hit like, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moving story. Now, let's go back to a time when Rusty wasn't a lonely dog at all. When his paws raced across a wide patch of grass under the gentle sun, and a loving family filled his world with warmth and laughter. Rusty wasn't always a lonely dog. There was a time, not so long ago, when his paws raced across a wide patch of grass under the gentle sun. Back then, he belonged to a family who cherished his big brown eyes and his steady, loyal heart. He was a German shepherd, proud and strong, with a bark that could fill the air and a spirit that lit up any room he walked into. But life doesn't always go the way we hope. And sometimes, in the hush of an ordinary afternoon, everything can change. For Rusty, it happened on a crisp autumn day. One minute he was chasing a bright red ball. The next, he was wrapped in confusion and pain. A sudden accident took more than just his sight. It stole his sense of security, too. Day by day, Rusty realized the world he knew had vanished. The green yard turned into a maze of unfamiliar obstacles, and he found himself stumbling where he used to sprint. When the family he trusted drifted away, it wasn't an abrupt farewell. It felt more like watching a slow sunset. One moment the light is there, the next, everything fades to gray. Rusty wondered if he would ever see hope again, or if he'd spend the rest of his days in darkness and doubt. Still, a tiny spark refused to die within him. Even in the quiet nights, when the wind rattled his makeshift shelter, Rusty clung to a memory of warmth. A hand once scratching behind his ears, a voice calling his name with love. In that memory, a seed of faith remained, and unbeknownst to Rusty, a stranger was about to enter his life, offering a second chance he never saw coming. There was a time when the world made perfect sense to him. Every morning used to begin with the rhythmic thump of his paws on hardwood, the rising sun warming his coat as he bounded into the yard with certainty in his step, the scent of dew-drenched grass, the steady voice calling him in for breakfast, the laughter of children spilling through the back door. These were the constants of his life. He didn't question them. He didn't have to. He belonged. But life, with its quiet cruelty, doesn't always change in thunderclaps. Sometimes it unravels in whispers. It began with a sound, screeching tires, a metallic crash, then silence. In that stillness, everything shifted. Pain bloomed across his skull like fire, and the light that had filled his days simply vanished. He woke in a place that smelled sterile and unfamiliar. The voices were hushed, worried, the hands that touched him too gentle, too careful. They said it wouldn't come back, the light, the sight, the world. At first he tried. He really did. He memorized the shape of the kitchen tile beneath his paws, the way the rug curled near the hallway, the position of the chair legs and table corners. He moved cautiously, relying on memory, on scent, on instinct. But memory is a fragile thing, and instinct has its limits. Every crash into a wall, every stumble into a chair leg chipped away at his confidence. He heard the sighs behind him, the disappointment. He could feel the patience thinning like worn fabric. The warmth that once filled the house started to fade. The hands that used to scratch behind his ears grew distant, distracted. The voice that once called him affectionately now only gave short-clipped commands. There were still meals, still shelter, but the affection that made it home was slipping away. He didn't understand why he had become a burden. Then, one morning, the door didn't open. He waited, ears alert, tail still. He waited until the waiting became a question, then a fear. And when the cold seeped through the floorboards and hunger curled in his belly, he realized no one was coming back. He wandered through the empty house, his house, though it no longer smelled like one. The furniture was gone. The warmth had been packed away with it. He nosed at closed doors, pressed his body against the walls, as if trying to feel the memories within them. There were none left, only echoes. Eventually, the ache drove him to the threshold. He stepped outside, not with purpose, but with resignation. His paws found the sidewalk, unfamiliar now, and he followed the breeze because it was the only thing left to follow. Cars passed without pause. Strangers hurried past with heads down, voices wrapped around phone calls and coffee cups. He was just another shape in the world now, invisible. The nights were the worst. The cold came first, crawling through his coat and into his bones. Then the loneliness, heavier than any weight he'd ever known. He curled beside dumpsters, under rusted stairwells, against the backs of buildings where the wind couldn't find him. Hunger gnawed at him with a quiet cruelty, and thirst burned in his throat. He searched for food in silence, bumping into shadows, stepping into puddles that soaked him to the skin. The world had become a cruel maze with no exit. Still, something within him refused to surrender. Not yet. Every time he lay down to rest, convinced it might be his last, he dreamed. Not of chasing balls or running free, but of voices, familiar ones, calling him by name. Of hands that once soothed him. He dreamed of home, not because it still existed, but because hope was the last piece of him the world hadn't taken. And it would be that hope, fragile and flickering, that kept him alive long enough to be found. The rain came down in sheets that evening, relentless and cold, as if the sky itself had run out of mercy. He lay curled beneath a rusted bench on the edge of a forgotten lot, fur soaked through, muscles trembling from exhaustion and cold. His body had grown thin, ribs pressing against skin, shoulders jutting like broken stones. But it wasn't the hunger that gnawed at him most. It was the silence, the kind that wraps around you when you've been forgotten. He had stopped expecting kindness. The world had taught him that people passed by without looking down. And then someone did. The footsteps were soft at first, not hurried, not heavy. They paused, a moment stretched between heartbeats, suspended in the rain. Then a voice broke through the storm. "Ah, you poor thing." It was low, a bit rough, from age or maybe grief, but there was something in it that hadn't touched his life in a long time. Compassion. He tried to lift his head, but could barely manage a twitch of his ears. Everything inside him screamed to flee, but there was nowhere left to run. He felt the nearness of the man before he saw, or rather sensed, him. Warm hands, slow and deliberate, reached beneath the bench. No grabbing, no force, just presence. The kind that doesn't demand, only offers. "You don't have to be afraid," the man said, more breath than words. He flinched when the coat touched him. Soft wool, smelling faintly of pine and tobacco. Then came arms, trembling slightly from the weight, lifting him with effort but not complaint. He didn't resist. For the first time in weeks, his body let go. Let go of the fight, let go of the fear. Inside the truck, the air was warm, the seat creaked under his weight, and the engine rumbled like distant thunder. He didn't know where they were going. He didn't care. His world had been nothing but endings. This felt, impossibly, like a beginning. The man, John, though he didn't know the name yet, drove with one hand resting gently on the edge of the seat, always near, never intrusive. He spoke in low tones, not questions, not demands, just presence. "You're safe now, I've got you." The ride blurred into a half-dream. The sound of rain on the roof, the occasional whisper of tires across wet pavement, and beneath it all, a fragile thread of something long forgotten: trust. They arrived at a house, wrapped in silence, no street lights, just a soft crunch of gravel under tires and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. The man opened the door and lifted him again, this time more gently, as if he feared breaking what was already so broken. Inside it was warm in the way a memory is warm, the scent of wood floors, old books, something baking. Or maybe that was just imagination filling in the blank spaces of comfort. A woman appeared, her voice catching the edges of surprise. "Or, did you find him?" "In the rain," John answered. "He's skin and bones." Hands joined his, softer, smaller, feminine. They didn't poke or prod, they touched with intention. Gentle explorations over his back, along his muzzle, checking not just for injury, but for pain. The kind you can't see. "He needs food," she said. "Warmth. A chance." He didn't know the word for it, but he understood. A chance. Soon there was a towel, warm and thick, dabbing at his soaked coat. A bowl of something soft and rich was placed near his snout. His nose twitched. The hunger returned like a storm breaking over still water. He ate, slowly at first, unsure if it was real, then faster, desperate to fill the aching hollow inside him. When he had eaten his fill, and the hands had dried him, and the blanket had been placed just right beneath him, he let his body sink into rest. Not sleep. Sleep had always been shallow, restless, but rest. The kind that lets you believe, if only for a moment, that the worst might finally be behind you. Before his eyes closed, he felt one last thing, a hand resting gently on his head. No leash, no commands, just stillness. "You're not alone anymore," the voice said. And for the first time in a very long time, he believed it. Rusty woke the next morning to the gentle hum of a heater and the scent of bacon wafting from the kitchen. The soft blanket beneath him felt foreign but pleasant, so unlike the hard sidewalks he'd known for far too long. His body ached in places he didn't realize existed, yet there was a curious sense of calm that he couldn't quite place. He tilted his head, ears twitching to catch the shuffle of slippers on linoleum and the low murmur of voices. Everything about this moment was new, warm, and strangely hopeful. John and Lucy, he'd come to learn her name in snippets of conversation, moved around him in quiet consideration. They offered him a shallow bowl of water, speaking in gentle tones. Whenever Rusty flinched, they paused, careful not to startle him. It was clear they understood he carried invisible wounds along with his physical ones. Lucy crouched down, whispering soft reassurances. She smelled like morning coffee and lavender, two scents Rusty found oddly comforting, even though he had no memory of them from his past. Over the next few days, Rusty's routine evolved into a gentle rhythm. In the mornings, Lucy would place a hand lightly on his neck and guide him to a small fenced backyard. The grass felt damp and cool beneath his paws, and the sun's warmth on his coat made him lift his muzzle skyward. He couldn't see the bright day, but he sensed it, the stirring of a breeze, the lively chirps of birds. When fear fluttered in his chest at each unfamiliar sound, Lucy's steady presence anchored him. John, on the other hand, took a more practical approach to Rusty's care. He researched what a blind dog might need, scribbling notes on a yellow pad. One afternoon, he brought home a specially designed harness with a front handle, hoping it could help Rusty navigate without colliding into furniture. With infinite patience, John and Lucy introduced him to each room, letting him sniff around so he could map the house in his mind. They tapped their toes on door thresholds and lightly rattled chairs so Rusty could identify where solid objects stood. Each small victory, a successful walk from the living room to the porch, or finding his water bowl without stumbling, felt like a triumph. At night, though, the old demon still came. Rusty would startle awake, muscles rigid, ears straining for the rumble of cars or the hiss of tires against wet pavement. Sometimes the memory of being left behind made him whine in his sleep, trapped in a dream where nobody answered his calls. On those nights, John shuffled over from his recliner, placing a firm yet reassuring hand on Rusty's back. "You're safe now, boy," he would say in that weathered voice. Slowly, Rusty's pulse would settle, and the dark quiet of the house would cradle him until morning. As the days wore on, Rusty began to trust those hands that offered kindness. He discovered Lucy's gentle laugh, how it rumbled softly in her chest whenever he stumbled upon a silly moment, like trying to chase after a squeaky toy that he couldn't quite pinpoint. And he noticed that John, stoic as he was, had a habit of humming under his breath whenever he was in deep thought, especially when Rusty managed a new milestone, like navigating the hallway without bumping into a corner. There was still a long road ahead. Rusty's blindness wouldn't simply vanish, and neither would the memories of all he'd lost. But he was no longer just a dog scrabbling for scraps in the rain. He was part of a household, maybe even a family again, where patience replaced pity, and where every small step forward felt like a beacon shining through the darkest night. In that sense, Rusty began to realize he might not need his sight to see what truly mattered. Here, in John and Lucy's home, there was finally space for hope to grow. The day unfolded with a hesitant promise as the golden afternoon light spilled across the quiet yard. A gentle breeze carried whispers of distant laughter and the subtle scent of fresh-cut grass, inviting him to step beyond the familiar confines of his sheltered routine. Today marked a turning point, a delicate foray into a world that was at once both enchanting and intimidating. He stood at the threshold of his safe haven, his senses attuned to every sound and scent. Nearby, voices filled with tender encouragement and soft reassurances reminded him that although his sight was lost, his other senses remained vivid guides. One of those voices, steady and kind, whispered words of gentle challenge, urging him to venture further into the unknown. It was an invitation to rediscover the beauty of the world through touch, sound, and scent. Carefully, he stepped onto the cool, dewy grass, each movement measured and tentative. The earth beneath his paws felt different, a mosaic of textures that spoke of life's resilience. The subtle crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant chirp of birds greeting the day, and the hum of a world in motion, all converged to create a symphony of sensations that both excited and unnerved him. As he wandered along a winding path in the park, every new aroma told a story. The sweet trace of blooming flowers mingled with the rich, musky scent of damp earth, and the gentle murmur of a nearby stream seemed to murmur secrets of renewal. At times, his steps faltered. A sudden noise, a stray laugh, a car's distant honk, could send a shiver through his core. Yet, with each pause, the familiar, comforting cadence of caring voices provided reassurance. They were there, invisible yet palpable, guiding him with patience and love. At one point, he encountered an unexpected obstacle, a low hedge whose rough leaves brushed against him, startling him momentarily. He paused, ears pricked and heart pounding, overwhelmed by the surge of uncertainty that such unexpected textures could bring. Then, like a gentle tide smoothing jagged edges, a reassuring voice soothed his trembling spirit. With that familiar comfort, he adjusted his course, circumnavigating the hedge with renewed determination. Every step he took was a quiet act of rebellion against the shadows of his past, a subtle assertion that even in darkness there was beauty and wonder to be found. The park, with its winding paths and open spaces, became a canvas on which he slowly painted a new understanding of freedom. His pace was unhurried, his mind open to the myriad sensations that now defined his reality, the soft rustle of trees overhead, the gentle cadence of distant footsteps, even the cool caress of the wind. Each detail wove together a tapestry of life that was both fragile and magnificent. In that moment, the journey itself became a testament to resilience. It was as if the world had whispered to him that every measured step, every cautious venture into the unknown, was a victory over the confines of fear. The very act of moving forward, of embracing the world with all his senses, was a quiet celebration of life reborn. As the day slowly yielded to the approaching dusk, the colors of the sky deepened and the ambient sound softened to a gentle murmur. He stood for a moment in the midst of that fading light, feeling the pulse of life around him, a silent promise that, despite the shadows, hope would continue to shine. With a heart brimming with fragile courage, he knew that the journey was far from over. Yet, in every cautious step and every reassuring murmur of support, he was learning that the essence of life was not lost in darkness, but illuminated by the kindness that guided him forward. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful day at the park, a tentative new rhythm began to emerge in his life. A rhythm defined not by frantic fear, but by a slowly growing trust in the gentle guidance surrounding him. Each morning, as the first light crept through the window, a subtle promise stirred within him. It was a promise whispered in soft, caring voices, and felt in the tender caress of a hand that lingered on his fur. Though darkness still shrouded his world, he now moved with a newfound resilience, determined to explore beyond the safe confines of yesterday's shelter. The days unfolded like chapters in a long-forgotten novel. He found himself learning the layout of his home with a clarity that only comes from relying on touch and sound, the familiar creak of the wooden floor, the distinct hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, even the gentle tick of the clock. All these became signposts along his journey back to trust. In this quiet ballet of routine, he discovered that every step he took was a quiet rebellion against the despair that once threatened to engulf him. Yet, the echoes of old fears were never far behind. At night, when the world fell silent and the murmur of the wind outside became a haunting chorus, shadows of the past crept in. Memories of loneliness, of harsh streets and empty rooms would surface, threatening to shatter the delicate calm he had begun to cherish. In those moments, a soft voice, a steady murmur from a familiar presence, would reach him. It was not the sound of a command, but a tender reminder that he was not alone. The warmth of that reassurance seeped deep into his heart, smoothing away the jagged edges of his anxiety. During one particularly cool evening, when the horizon bled hues of amber and soft violet, he found himself at the doorstep of a neighborhood park once again. This time, however, the park felt like an old friend rather than a daunting expanse. His companions, quiet yet unwavering, stood just a pace behind, allowing him the freedom to wander, to trust his instincts, while knowing that gentle hands were always there to guide him should he falter. The rustle of leaves underfoot and the soft murmur of distant laughter became a symphony that celebrated his every tentative victory. In that moment he paused at the edge of a winding path. The scent of rain-soaked earth mingled with the crisp, cool air inviting him forward. Though every sound was amplified and every texture an unfamiliar discovery, he stepped carefully, guided not only by his remaining senses, but by an inner strength that had been nurtured over countless moments of tender care. His heart, once burdened by overwhelming dread, now beat with a steady cadence, a quiet testimony to the resilience of spirit. As he ambled along the path, the world around him seemed to whisper encouragement. The soft coo of a dove, the gentle murmur of a nearby brook, even the distant hum of a passing car. All these notes wove together to create a lullaby of possibility, and with each step, the fear that once dictated his every move began to recede, replaced by a cautious hope. A hope that suggested maybe the darkness was not an endless void, but merely a canvas upon which light could be reborn. In this gradual, relentless march toward a life reclaimed, he realized that every step forward, no matter how small, was an act of courage. It was a defiant declaration that the past would not dictate his future, that in the midst of uncertainty, compassion and perseverance would light the way, and so, with a heart that still trembled, but now beat with promise, he continued onward. Each footfall a gentle affirmation that trust, once shattered, could indeed be pieced together again. The morning broke with a gentle promise, as soft light crept over the familiar landscape of home. In that quiet moment, every sound, the distant hum of a car, the rustle of leaves in a tender breeze, seemed imbued with the possibility of renewal. He stood at the threshold, not with the certainty of a guided soul, but with a cautious determination born of hard-won trust. Today was the day he would prove to himself that, even in darkness, one can find the way home. A plan had been set in motion, a small, deliberate test of independence. He was to venture a short distance away, guided only by the lingering scent of home and the echo of gentle voices that had become his steady companions. His world, once a realm of palpable fear and relentless confusion, now held the promise of rediscovery through the very senses that had always remained: touch, sound, and the soft memory of familiar fragrances. With a final pat of reassurance from a comforting hand, he stepped away from the secure confines of his yard. Each step on the cool pavement was measured, deliberate, as if he were retracing a path etched into his very soul. The sidewalk, a mosaic of textures and echoes, whispered guidance to him in a language only he could decipher. The distant murmur of a neighbor's laughter and the faint, welcoming aroma of cooking from nearby homes became his North Star. Every so often, uncertainty tugged at his resolve, a sudden gust of wind, a stray sound that threatened to disorient him. But he pressed on, his heart beating steadily as he navigated the subtle contours of his surroundings. He recalled every gentle reminder of the love that had nurtured him, every encouraging word that had promised he would not be alone. And so, he walked, trusting that his inner compass, recalibrated by months of patient guidance, would lead him back. As he neared the end of the block, the world seemed to exhale a quiet sigh. The familiar cadence of footsteps on the driveway, the gentle creak of the old porch door, these were the sounds of home. With a final, tentative step, he arrived at the doorstep he had long yearned to reclaim. In that moment, time paused. The lingering fear and the distant echoes of abandonment dissolved into a deep, resonant sense of belonging. A warm embrace awaited him, a silent celebration of his journey and the quiet triumph of reclaiming trust. The voices that had once soothed him now rose in joyful harmony, affirming that he had found his way back, not just to a physical place, but to a haven of love and understanding. In that embrace, he realized that home was far more than walls and a roof. It was the sanctuary of compassion and connection. Here, at long last, he stood whole. His journey through darkness had revealed that even when the light seems lost, the enduring warmth of home and human kindness can guide one back to a life reawakened. Rusty's journey reminds us that true strength isn't just about overcoming obstacles. It's about discovering the courage to trust again when everything you once knew has been taken away. Even in the deepest darkness, a single act of kindness can ignite hope, proving that none of us are ever truly alone, as long as we keep faith in the love that surrounds us. If Rusty's story touched your heart, please support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing with someone who needs a little light today. Your encouragement helps us bring more uplifting stories to life, reminding everyone that hope, compassion, and second chances can make miracles happen every day.